Welcome to NCSS Here for You. For over 50 years, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to quality psychosocial services to the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. We take our role in the community seriously, and we strive to provide the highest quality services. According to Erik Erikson, a noted developmental psychologist, every person must pass through a series of 8 interrelated stages over the entire life cycle. NCSS provides a continuum of services to meet the needs of individuals who at any point seek assistance. NCSS's purpose is creating a stronger community, one person at a time. Now, let's get to today's show. I'm Joe Halco, Director of Community Relations for Northwestern Counseling and Support Services, and welcome to another episode of NCSS Here for You. Each month on this program, we discuss a human services topic, and we do that with staff from one of our 3 direct services divisions. Our 3 service divisions are Behavioral Health Services, Children, Youth, and Family Services, and Developmental Services. And, on occasion, we also have members from organizations that NCSS collaborates with throughout the year. This month's episode is titled, Making Meaning Out of Grief. Today's discussion is based on the teachings of David Kessler, an expert and lecturer on grief and loss. My guest will present new information on the benefits and stages of grief and will provide insight, tools, and strategies to help someone through the grieving process. In addition, we'll discuss what to say and not to say to someone who is grieving, debunk myths, and reduce stigma associated with grief. To discuss making meaning out of grief in greater detail, I'm pleased to introduce this month's guests, and they are Sydney Boyd, Peer Services Team Leader in the Developmental Services Division, and Chris Gravlin, the Service Coordinator, also in the Developmental Services Division. I'd like to welcome both of you to the program.
Hello,
Thank
Joe.
you, Joe.
So let's begin with why is it important to understand grief?
Well, people really are very uncomfortable with the subject of death, particularly in this society. We see it as a sign of weakness, and we tend to be very stoic about the subject, cover up a lot of our feelings, uncomfortable with our own mortality. But the grief process can be such a healing process for people who have experienced loss or have even gotten a diagnosis of a terminal illness. So it's really important that we help people through that sorrow as they're experiencing those different stages, and not worry so much about composure.
And also, it's a process that we need to be going through our daily life. And a lot of the times we don't even notice that it's happening. But if there was some point in time when you actually couldn't get through that process with even just the little things that we come across, you'd be stuck more than you'd ever think so. So it's a very important process to actually go through in order to keep yourself healthy and to live a healthy life.
And could we talk a little bit about David Kessler? And I know a lot of what we're going to discuss today has to do with what he teaches.
Right. Well, we had just come back from a wonderful training that he did in Burlington, and so we brought some of that information back to the agency and did a scaled-down version of it. David Kessler is a writer and an expert on the subject of death and dying. He's actually known as a thanatologist, and in the science of thanatology, people such as David are studying the effects of death and dying on people so that they can help them with their needs. And he has co-written some books with some very prominent people in the field. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I would imagine many people viewing this show are very familiar with her. She was a medical resident back in the 60s, and she observed in the hospital where she was working that the terminally ill patients were just not being tended to at all, especially their emotional needs. So She conducted hundreds of interviews, and she didn't invent the stages of grief, but she realized that terminally ill patients were experiencing these stages, and so she wrote the book on death and dying, and David Kessler had the opportunity to work with her and also write some books with her. She has since passed away.
She also found out when she was working in the hospital doing her research that there was a specific janitor who followed her, who would visit each and individual room during the evenings and at night after hours. And Elizabeth actually followed this janitor and tried to investigate what was happening and why these patients were doing much better than the other patients. And she found out that this janitor was actually just spending time with these people and just listening to them and giving them that out that they need in order to just let everything go and just feel good. And the janitor expressed this to Elizabeth, and it really connected to her why this connection between people with people helps the healing process of grief. David also spent some time with Mother Teresa, and he found out there as well that he thought Mother Teresa did some amazing things and did some kind of secret stuff to make all these people better. And what he found out when he asked Mother Teresa, what can he do to help, he said, I want you to just go there and hold them. It was just about being there, bathing them, carrying them to the bed, just spending time next to them, and that's what they needed. There was no medication or secret pill that was making these people's lives better. It was just that time spent.
And he's actually a volunteer for the Red Cross mental health disaster teams. And so he's often visiting some of these catastrophic sites such as 9/11 and plane crashes, and could very well be in the Philippines right now, where there's just mass casualty, and so he's helping the bereaved on a really large scale.
Now, could you describe the 5 stages of grief?
Yes, we can.
And the 5 stages, starting with
The first one's denial.
right.
Leads into anger, bargaining, depression, and then we finalize in acceptance, which is also adjustment, is something we've been kind of discovering in our research and different things we've been looking into. Denial is kind of the process of not wanting to accept that this has happened, be it anything. A lot of the time, grief is associated with death, but it doesn't always have to be death. Sometimes if you lose a limb or something that was really important to you, any kind of loss, you're in that denial that that didn't happen. Some people don't actually make it past that stage, and also the stages aren't linear. It can come and go in any different order. Sometimes someone may never move past a certain stage, but eventually the goal is to get them where they need to be as far as to live a healthy life.
And have some closure, and that's usually like that final stage. And as you said, it's not a linear process, and you might not even experience all of the stages. You might even stay in one stage for a long time, and then many years later you could easily revert back to one of the stages of grief. But we need to be observers and not putting time constraints or any expectations on people who are going through these stages. We sit back and we just are objective observers, and it really is different for everyone. It's a real individualized process. Some people will often say, how long should somebody be in denial, and there is no set
quantity, time frame.
And also, speaking of observing, I think it's important to be able to apply these stages to certain life events and actually be able to see them happening, because it's not always that easy. One example, or few, would be college students or someone who has important documentations, or maybe in 15 or 18-page paper that they've saved. Well, sometimes the computer crashes, or that file's corrupted, or something happens, you didn't save what you wanted to, and that is now gone. And the first stage, which would be denial, would be rechecking all of your files. Oh my God, no, it's got to be there. It's somewhere. I know I saved that file. I know it's there. And there's the denial you're witnessing. that next leads into anger. No, I just can't do this anymore. I'm going to fail my class. This is just not happening.
And you
maybe
wanna
they'll
blame
slam the
somebody,
computer.
yeah.
They'll blame the teacher, or they didn't give me enough time, and it just kind of goes to the anger stage. The bargaining then is just, oh, I'm going to turn my computer on. If it's there, I just need it to be there. If it's there, I'll go do something good today. Or if it's there, I'll never procrastinate again. And there's that bargaining you're seeing into place. And then it might be the depression when your computer finally loads up and you're like, it's not there. I'm going to fail my class. I can't do this. What am I going to do? And then the acceptance is when you finally load up a new document and just start writing again. So that's a good way you can see it in your daily life.
That's a wonderful analogy too. And it's important when you start out in the denial stage that it's really like the person they're touching that pain, and then it's okay for them to pull back. Anger is probably the strongest emotion, and the one that might make people feel the most uncomfortable, but it's a perfectly normal emotion in this particular, experience for the person. As long as there's no self-harm or anybody is at risk of being in harm, it's okay to get really, really angry.
And I think it's hard to accept that anger in our society when someone sees someone die and then you see them going in their house and burning everything, or taking a bat and hitting something. That's just, they're trying to get that out. It's not so much violence as it is trying to process what happened. And that's part of that stage getting through. Because once they can process that anger, they'll move into bargaining and then maybe depression, but they're moving down so that they can live their life and try to get through that. So.
And the bargaining, of course, are the what-ifs,
Sure. Sure, and I was just going to say the anger part, certainly it's like you're saying, there is no exact time frame for each one of these stages, and some people never make it through all the stages, or they skip a stage. But that the anger stage itself is one of those, I would imagine, that is really a broad category, because some people can be angry, but yet they're really at this end of the pendulum, where somebody else can get extremely agitated by the situation. And as you were saying, the person has to do what is right for them in that circumstance.
And it's similar to depression, because we know that people can be chronically depressed, and that's a mental health disorder that needs to be treated. But in the grief process, depression is kind of an overused word, and it's really sadness. When does it become a deterrent or an illness for a person? And I think if you always go back and think, well, once it starts affecting their activities of daily living and their job and their relationships, then you probably do need to seek some help. But being blue and being sad is very, very normal reaction. And there are quite a few differences between depression in a grief stage and chronic depression in the clinical sense.
Now, let's look at some of the causes of grief, because as you've already stated, certainly death is one cause that would cause someone to grieve, but there are other things that occur in one's life that would make them or put them into a sense of grieving.
Well, so it can...
Full gamut.
Grief can come in any time, any spectrum. I mean, it's usually seen as death, or usually in the big picture of things, and there's also very little things that we subconsciously just overlook day to day. One example would be if you got a speeding ticket. There's some grief right there. Your denial, I wasn't speeding. Your anger, drive even faster home. Your bargaining, well, I'll just, maybe if I just go to the court, they'll just not issue it. And then your depression, when you look at the ticket and you're like, wow, this is so much money. And then you accept it and you pay it off. And so there's something just as simple as that to something as complex as losing an ability you don't have, getting older, not being able to do the things you do, losing a child, miscarriages, having your child taken away from you, foster homes and things. Jobs.
And even just a change in job. There's still a tremendous sense of loss for some people. Losing your home or moving to another home. because you've lived somewhere for such a long time. And in this day and age, financial security is a tremendous loss. Relationships, anywhere from divorce to even just losing a best friend, not necessarily through death. And the obvious, people just losing a limb, or
Sure.
the ability to see. You were talking about physical abilities, cognitive abilities. As we're seeing many people with dementia. And a pet. We can't forget our pets.
That's
And we forget to be empathetic about that, because the pets are, a huge part of people's families. You don't get time off from work for it, but it causes a lot of sadness and grief for people because of the attachment.
Another thing is, even if you just have a child or something in those stance, there can be grief in that process. Yes, it's happy, but all the things that you're going to be having to adjust
Absolutely.
to, the things that you might be losing. Maybe you had a living room that you used to spend a lot of time in, and now that needs to be the nursery, and you're losing that part. So there's a lot of different places that grief shows up that I think our culture just doesn't view or isn't open to, and I think that's why it's mostly turned towards death, because that's when it's really seen and associated with, I would suppose.
And now, Sid, earlier you had talked about the depression scenario and that sort of thing, but what are the differences to look for between depression and grief?
Well, I believe, and this is, I'm not a clinician, but people who are grieving and are blue are often going to respond to receiving support. Somebody with chronic depression is usually very resistant to seeking help. And when you talk about the 5 stages, you'll see a person very openly angry when they're going through grief. But in chronic depression, the person might be irritated but not able to express that anger.
A few other things that you can see in the differences is with grief and depression, there is the overlap. There's maybe they're having trouble sleeping, that's a symptom, not eating, feeling sad or lonely. Those are all parts. But I think one big difference between depression and grief is from losing someone, and depression's more of an internal piece that's about you.
Not
Something
associated to a specific loss necessarily.
Exactly. And then you're trying to get through your personal ego and self-esteem, where this loss does affect your self-esteem, but it's more of an outside loss type of a thing.
You'll see a real sense of hopelessness with people who are chronically depressed, and sometimes they'll really feel that they are suffering from physical health issues, diseases, pain, often psychosomatic, but very real to them and very debilitating. In the grief process, someone might feel not very well, but it usually passes, and they're not, chronically debilitated.
And another one is with depression, it usually inhibits your work as far as going to work and being able to function in daily life, where grief, it's just difficult to continue working and things like that. They still go, but you see maybe less productivity, low energy levels, but they're still able to function normally.
And that's where we come back to your activities of daily living, when it starts really impacting your work and your productivity and your relationships, and just being unable to take care of yourself.
Now, with the time of year that we're in here, the holiday season, it's probably a good time to look at, what does it mean when people grieve the milestones? Because certainly there will be many individuals who, in one way or another, have suffered a major loss within the past year, and now they're about to embark on the holiday season for the very first time without a loved one or someone that they were close to.
Absolutely.
So if you could explain that to the audience a little bit.
Especially with the 2 holidays coming up, which are huge, Thanksgiving and Christmas and some other holidays. And so
there was a few suggestions that David Kessler brought up, and one of them was when you're eating at a dinner table, if there's specific seats that these people sit at, to still set the table for them, give them a plate, cup, keep the chair, so that they still feel connected and that they're still a part of the family.
Right.
Even though they have lost them, just to have that sense that they're there and accept the grief and just be with it, instead of trying to push it aside and be like, I don't want to talk about this, or this is a little uncomfortable, will help, hopefully.
And some people light a candle for the person,
Yep.
just to have that sense of togetherness again. One of the ideas that someone suggested at the training that we went to was just to, in lieu of a holiday Thanksgiving dinner, have everybody do community service, you know, in honor of the person that they've lost, which is a wonderful idea. And, you know, there's other events that can trigger emotions around this time of year. Anniversaries, and not just the obvious. Not just the anniversary of two people getting married, but the date that someone might have gotten a diagnosis of terminal illness, or the date that they left the house and never came back because they were admitted into a hospital and then passed away. Sometimes around this time of year, people might think about their first date with their spouse, and it's sad.
There was also talk of the idea of canceling the holiday for these people who are having a difficult time with it, because as far as being able to handle it and get through it, if canceling the holiday for yourself and just treating it as another day, that's okay too. If that's going to help you to get on and live your life fully, then no one said that you have to celebrate the holiday.
Sure.
So that's
Right.
another piece to it.
And then some of these global events that you've often talked about, where someone might not know someone who's passed away, or you know, and yet this time of year it can trigger those emotions you've often talked about,
Like,
the connection that people make.
like with Michael Jackson, when he passed, there was a lot of
People.
people that he was connected with. Queen Diana, I believe.
Princess Diana.
Princess
Diana.
Thank you. When she passed away, that affected a lot of people as well. And those certain connections, usually it's grief's connected to grief, because those things may have triggered something that other people have went through, and it's kind of revisiting that grief. Because when something happens, it's always going to be there with you. It's not something you just forget about and it's in your past. It's where the adjustment comes to, where now instead of it's always in front of you, you're pulling it to a side of you, and you're just carrying it with you, and you're with it, instead of always thinking about it or always having to face it.
And
So-
even these catastrophic events that are happening right now in this time of year conjures up memories. When there's so much death, it conjures up memories for other people. And then a lot of the people that we serve with disabilities, and in particular, Chris and I work with people with developmental disabilities who might have challenges with their communication, and these holidays come up and reminds them of a lot of loss and a lot of memories, and they have a difficult time sometimes, you know, expressing that grief. So we really need to be mindful around this time of year, because they can really display a lot of emotions and behaviors that aren't healthy for them. And many of our clients don't often get to go to the funerals for their loved ones or parents. There's not a lot of discussion around that loss, and yet a couple years later or around holiday time, some of these people really start showing that pain, and it catches everybody by surprise, but it all makes sense, you know, that they never had a chance to go through that grief process. And now it's Thanksgiving, and they're being reminded that their mom is gone, for example.
Now, can you help someone who is grieving, and in those cases, what can you say to try to assist someone?
Well, before you try, you also want to think of what's your relationship with them.
Absolutely.
and it's always going to be situational. You can say something really awful to, or that you thought was nice to someone, but depending on your relationship, it might come across very bad. So the timing, who you are, and how it sounds all come into play. But I think you had a few that you wanted to bring up. There were some
Well,
good examples.
You really want to be objective, and you really want to be a good listener. We all mean well. Sometimes people make comments like, well, he lived a long life, or my husband died a lot younger than yours did, and it's all for the, intended to make people feel better. Some of the people that I talked with, again, at the training that we gave, said that, those kind of comments really made them feel bad, but they also realized that people meant well. So it's really best to just be present, and sometimes you don't have to say anything. And if you're going to offer help, perhaps, when can I call you? What's a good time for you? Can I stop by? What's your schedule look like? And work around them. I was speaking with one of my colleagues about this subject, and she said sometimes it depends on the person's resiliency, which is a lot like a pain threshold.
Yes.
And so you have people with a high resiliency. It doesn't mean that they're any stronger than anybody else, but they can go back to work the day after the funeral and be productive and go out and appear to be having fun and have relationships. But this colleague of mine said you'd be surprised that when everybody goes home, if you were to go to the person's house, you would see a whole different scenario. So it's good to reach out to those people that appear to be so composed. Hugs are really nice, and not giving advice. And some of the ideas we got were from some of the people at our own training, and they gave us a list of these. I don't necessarily know how you feel, but I'm here to help, and saying very little can be very, very comforting too.
Just having the person there, I guess,
Right.
in many instances.
Absolutely.
I think also trying to alleviate the uncomfortableness that people from the outside feel, that purple elephant in the room, when you meet that person and you see them walking by, it's like, oh, I should walk this way, or I don't want to confront them because I don't know what to say. Sometimes just to go up and say, hey, how you doing, is okay. Just to act naturally, and if they want to approach you or talk to you more about it, they will.
Take the lead from them.
Yep.
And for people who might like to talk, ask them, questions like, or make a statement. You remember when your son won that soccer tournament, that's a really tough scenario, because often we'll be with parents who have lost children, and we feel that we really should not be bringing any topics up about our own children when that particular mother really does want to talk about the memories of when she had a son who was a gifted athlete, or high academics, and why wouldn't they want to be talking about that? Or when they had the first date with their husband. I mean, those are great memories, and they don't want to sweep them under the rug.
Well, believe it or not, our time is just about up. But before we do leave, though, how can people get more information or support on this subject?
Well, contacting Northwestern Counseling and Support Services is a great start. We can help people make connections with some grief groups and some grief counseling right in the area. I think you had mentioned something about the Home Health Agency.
The Home Health Agency also has some resources available.
Oh, Franklin County Home Health Agency.
And they do some grief support.
And then there's also a website, www.grief.com, which is also very useful. It has videos and a lot of different write-ups and information. David Kessler actually referenced that website as well.
And what is that website again?
www.grief.com.
Okay.
It's very inspirational, and it reaches people all over the world. And of course, his books and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's books are very, very helpful and inspirational.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I want to thank my special guests, Sydney Boyd and Chris Gravlin, for being on the show this month and for sharing their insights on the grievance process, the myths, and reducing stigma associated with grief. I also want to thank you, the viewer, for spending time with us again this month. I'm Joe Halco, and I'll be back again next month with another episode of NCSS Here for You. This has been another episode of NCSS Here for You. We hope that you found today's discussion informative and educational. For over 50 years, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to quality psychosocial services to the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. Thanks once again for tuning in this month. NCSS's purpose remains creating a stronger community, one person at a time.